Oh, wow. How many remember the Brady Bunch? Yeah, okay, good. I was afraid it'd be lost on you. You're maybe too young, but. So this lady walks up to me after the service. She'd just broken up with her boyfriend, and she said, I just broke up with my boyfriend, and men are like dogs. And I thought, hey, what are you saying? And I said, what do you mean men are like dogs? She didn't say, I didn't say men are like dogs. I said men are dogs. That ramped up pretty quick. You know, I think about how men are and women are, and I think about how dogs are, and that's probably not a good metaphor. That's all I'm saying. And here we're going to begin this series called Recapturing the Family. What I want to do is take you through a series of studies on men and women and children, what families look like. So we're going to take the month of October and just really camp on that. And think about this. You need to know who men are, what men are. You need to know who women are and what women are. You need to know who children are and how to let children be children. We need to know how to recapture God within the family. In the middle of the family, we need to recapture what a family looks like. What is a biblical prescription of that? So I was thinking, well, I'll go back to that metaphor of dogs. We have two dogs. One's a male, one's a female. One's big, one's little. The little one is a female. One's a beagle, and she believes that she's in charge of the house. And Jax, the big dog, is a male, and we adopted him from the shelter about 2 years after, or a year or so after we adopted Biscuit, our beagle. And the first day, they went out. There was a bone outside, a dog toy. It was a dog bone. And Biscuit had it, and she set it down, and Jax came up and grabbed it from the ground, and she goes to get it, and he turned around and grabbed her by the neck with his mouth and slammed her to the ground and just held her there. Everybody was freaking out. I'm like, yes. Because Jax is an alpha male. Now, there can be an alpha female. Maybe you're in that kind of relationship. But I want to talk about maybe some of the misconceptions about what an alpha male is, what a leader is, what a man looks like, and what God says it means to be a real man. So welcome to Grace Church. Are you glad to be here today? Yeah. Glad to have you here. Hey, you know, I was just noticing on Facebook Live, and by the way, we have hundreds of people that join us. In fact, right now we have hundreds of people between online campus and Facebook Live, but I want you to welcome with me, we have people from Atlanta, Alabama, Texas, Northern California, New York, Spring Valley, Temecula, Colorado, Florida, Oregon, Washington, Philadelphia. And I wonder about the people in Spring Valley. Why don't you just come over? Come on, let's just come on, you know. But we welcome, let's give them a welcome, all those online with us. Yeah, welcome, glad to have you with us. You know what I want to do? We are right in the middle of our Connect group fair. And if you look at the wall out there, you'll see all the Connect groups. As of this date, we have over 1,300 people in Connect groups already signed up. We expect another couple hundred or so to sign up today between our two campuses. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't gotten in the Connect group and you're wondering, I'd like to have Mike and David, if you would stand. Is David here? There's David. He's standing. Mike's right there. Just stand up for a second. These guys lead a group called Starting Point. If you ever wonder, what is it about this church? What is it about Christianity? And this is a great group to get started. So check with one of these guys afterwards. David is a giant, and Mike is a giant of a man. Let's give him a hand. Yeah. So recapturing what it really means to be a man. What are the ideas that you have about a man being a real man? So I was looking, when I talk about the measure of a man, I looked at this blog. It was a blogger who wrote about alpha and beta males. So I'm going to read to you what she wrote. Men are like dogs. No, she didn't write that. This is what she said. Alpha males are, here's the quote, a very high level of social confidence and self-assurance, determined, not held back by fear, comfortably takes the lead, takes a masculine approach to women, she wrote, which makes them feel feminine and girly in response. I didn't write this. I'm just reading to you what she wrote. Women respect him and remain attracted to him. Whatever. Beta male. Quote, mild levels of social confidence and self-assurance, mild levels of insecurity, nervousness, and fear in social situations. Follows the lead of the alpha male because he is either too afraid or lacks the confidence and belief in himself to be a leading male. So those are kind of the prevailing views of kind of two kinds of men, either alpha or beta. And there's a lot of men who think, well, if I'm a beta male, and I'll get into this in a minute, that I can't be a leader. And let me tell you, I have a friend who is a pastor of a very large church. He's an incredible leader. He's actually a leader of leaders. And he, for sure, is a beta male. He is not an alpha male. Now, I am an alpha male. I'm just saying what I am. But what does that mean? What does that mean to Kimberly, is more importantly. Let me kind of explain. I believe there are two kind of alpha males and two kind of beta males. And ladies, if you're married to a man who is a beta male or an alpha male, you need to know this. Alpha 1 male is strong, confident, assertive, and balanced. As he relates to others, he is kind, empowering, and generous. So that alpha male is the guy that is independent, and yet he's still kind. He is confident both externally and internally. He is secure enough, now listen to this, not to control through dominance. When we think of an alpha male, we think of my dog, Jax, just taking that dog and slamming Biscuit to the ground. That is not a good man. Try it, see how that works. He commands respect. He doesn't demand respect, but he commands respect. That is, that his lifestyle draws people to respect him. And here's very important about this Alpha 1 male. He can defer in various situations and environments. He is self-confident in him. He is so confident within himself that he can easily defer to other leaders. So we don't think of alpha males this way. So Alpha 2 male, this is what we typically think of an alpha male in negative sense. As it relates to himself, he is weak, he is insecure, he's conceited, and he's imbalanced. Women say amen. To others, he is controlling, and he's often mean, and he's aggressive. So we think of these alpha males that they are really confident when they dominate and control, but in reality, that control comes from a deep sense of insecurity and fear. He's not strong, he's weak. And out of his weakness, he tries to overcome it by controlling his environment. He demands respect, he doesn't command it. Demanding respect says, this is what you will do, whereas commanding respects, here's how I live, and it draws people into the leadership. His insecurity causes him to be jealous and controlling and quick to anger. And as it relates, this Alpha 2 male, as it relates to his insecurity, he's unable to defer. He has to dominate in every environment he's in. How you doing, guys? Where are you at? If you're an Alpha 2, the goal is to become an Alpha 1. You're not going to change who you are. Your personality pretty much determines whether you're an alpha or a beta. So let's look at, real quickly at a beta, and I'll give you an opportunity to get a Bible here in a moment. So ushers, wait, I forgot that, but I'll be with you in a moment. Beta 1, self. He is, as it relates to himself, he is strong, confident, quiet, and balanced. The difference between an alpha and a beta has to do with personality and assertiveness, where a beta is more quiet. That doesn't mean he's not a leader. That doesn't mean he doesn't have something to say. As it relates to others, he's kind, he's empowering, and he's generous. But when you think of an alpha male or a beta male, you think of somebody who is not a leader. And that would be further from the truth. Just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're not a strong leader. If you're married to a beta male, you should not try to turn him into an alpha male. Let him be who God made him to be. And let him be a great leader in your home. And the beta male, the beauty of the beta 1 male is that he's so balanced. Even though he's less assertive, we would sit in a board meeting. I had one of the leaders that we had in our creative team. He was a beta. He wasn't an alpha. And he would sit in the meeting, and he would listen. And I'm an alpha, so I'd start throwing stuff out, and the creative team would go, that's adorable. And they didn't respond because I didn't have that good of idea. But this guy was great at ideas. And then he would say, I have an idea. He almost felt like he needed to raise his hand like he's in a classroom. And he would just interrupt briefly, and the whole room went silent to hear what he had to say. Because he was a strong leader, even though he was a beta male. A beta 2 male is someone who is insecure, withdrawn, and fearful. As it relates to others, he controls through passive-aggressive behavior. And he has a difficult time deferring to other people because he's so weak. And he tends to withdraw out of fear. And when he reaches a point of conflict, he just shuts down. So the goal, if you're a beta, is not to be a beta 2, but to be a beta 1. So where are you guys? What kind of guys are you? And ladies, if you're married or if you're dating a guy, what kind of guy is it? If he's beta, don't try to turn him into an alpha. If he's a beta, encourage him to grow and mature as that beta and become a beta 1. Now, if you need a Bible, would you come forward? Because I want you to look with me at in 1 Kings chapter 2. 1 Kings chapter 2. I want to talk about the gentle power. Just raise your hand if you need that Bible. I want to talk about that gentle power of a real godly man. What does he look like? A true male power. You see, I believe that it's important for men to have power. But that power doesn't have to be dominant and controlling and insecure. He needs to have an internal power, an internal control, because he knows how to listen, he knows how to speak properly. Real power is not about outside control of other people and situations, but it's about the influence that comes from self-control and an internal power. 1 Kings chapter 2. So if you look in the Old Testament, you find 1 Kings. This is what it says in chapter 2, verse 1. When David's time to die drew near, he commanded Solomon his son, saying, so these are the last words of David, and he's preparing his son for leadership. And this is really important because it goes to what does it mean to be a man, and it goes to how to build a legacy. And so, guys, I want you to listen to this because we need to recapture what it really means to be a man. Look at verse 2. It says this, I am about to go the way of all the earth. That is a flowery way of saying I'm going to die. The whole earth, every human being dies. And David realizes that he's at the end of his life. And so he says to his son these great words, these important words, his last words, and they are this. Be strong, and show yourself to be a man. You show yourself a man through strength. What kind of strength is he talking about? Now, if you want a biblical understanding of what a real godly man is, look at the life of David and see that he had this deep passion. He was a very melancholy individual, and yet he was a great leader. He was also a great warrior. But he had a tender heart. And what is he talking about when he says strong? So let me give you, because when this was written, it was written in Hebrew, and the Old Testament is Hebrew, the New Testament is Greek, but the Old Testament word for strong is a word that means to seize and to conquer. Now, for Jax, our alpha male dog, it means to dominate. And I love to watch the dogs play. They love each other. If we have to take one to the vet and the other one has to stay home, it's like they're lost. Either one of them, they just are best of friends. But still, Jax has to dominate. And when they're playing with a bone or a toy, Jax tries to get it away from Biscuit, and Biscuit will run out with the toy and bring it back, and he's across the room. She'll drop it on the floor and go, "What?" And Jax goes, "I'll show you what." And he pounces. She grabs it and runs. She's way faster than him. And he just, he gets tired out, but he wants to control that dog. That is not the kind of strength. When he says to seize and conquer, this word strong, to seize and conquer, really we have to ask ourselves this question: to conquer what? To seize what? Two words that define those words strong. To seize. Some guys have to seize their family so that they can control them. They control their behavior. They control their thinking. They control their lifestyle. And I can tell you this, if you do this with your children, dads, if you're an alpha 2 male, insecure and weak and have to control, I promise you, your kids, when they get out from under your control, they will rebel against what you taught them. You need to be gentle. You need to be kind, even if you're an alpha. And so what does it mean to seize? What is it that you're going to seize? And then what is it that you're going to conquer? David was a great warrior, and he conquered many enemies, and he would literally take control of them. So when he uses this word, is he talking about being a warrior? You will show yourself a man when you go around and conquer other kingdoms. That's what we think of as a man so many times. But it's interesting. When he says, show yourself a man, a true man will find his strength not in his ability to control other people and things, but to control himself. If you're wondering about this, look at the next verse, because he becomes very clear. And this is what he talks about when we talk about seizing and conquering. In verse 3 gives us the definition of what that means. And keep the charge of the Lord your God. You need to seize and charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commands, his rules, and his testimonies. You see, David gives this to Solomon, this instruction to Solomon. If you're going to show yourself to be a man, it's not that you are going to conquer kingdoms, it's that you're going to conquer the truth of who God is, and you're going to walk in those ways. So let's talk about those two things, keeping and walking. When he says here, keep the charge, it's interesting. He uses this word shamar in the Greek. Shamar means to surround with a hedge. And the idea of, if you have a surrounded with a hedge, and literally a hedge of thorns, the goal of that is to keep predators out and keep those you want to protect in. Remember, David was a shepherd. And so oftentimes we think of where the flock would go, and they would go into an area where they're protected and the shepherd can watch them. And oftentimes we see a fence around them and stuff like that. But often what they would do is they would take and pile up thorns and create a space where no predator could get in, and nor could the sheep get out. And so when he uses this term keep, this word shamar, he's talking about keeping predators out. And he's saying, in order for you to have a mind of great power and to show that you are a man, you must keep the distractions of life out of your mind. Strength comes from internal control. And the idea is here, this charge or this watch, to keep the watch of the Lord your God. That is the idea of really understanding that God has directives, and when we follow them, our minds are protected. We become strong internally. And we don't need to control other people. We don't need to demand respect. We actually command respect by our own internal strength. You know, we have a backyard that goes down a hill, and down that hill, I don't know how this happened, but when we had our fence put in, we have a big piece of property, about an acre, and we've got almost all of it fenced. And when they went down the hill, for whatever reason, they got the posts in the cement, but there are many places where the ground and the bottom of the fence, there's a gap. Not great for keeping dogs in. So we have used everything to try to keep those dogs in. And just down the hill is this huge valley. And in this valley are coyotes, and you can hear them kill animals. And people say, "Have you seen my little fluffy cat?" I heard an attack last night, but our dogs, for whatever reason, want to get out. And they've gotten out many times. They're courageous. Biscuit, this little fearful little beagle, she will sit up on the hillside and howl and bark. "You coyotes, come on." And we've literally, I didn't see it, but our kids did, saw that a coyote's down at our fence looking at Biscuit, and she's so strong and powerful. One day she got out underneath the fence. And when I got her, she was just below our fence, and you can hear the howling of coyotes down there, and she is just shaking in fear because that's not the safe place. I brought her back in, and we've used all kinds of methods to keep them from getting out, but the real goal is to keep the coyotes from getting in. What do you expose your mind to? Do you want to be a strong male? It's not by you working out. I encourage that. It's not by you learning to control other people and manipulate other people through passive-aggressive behaviors or aggressive-aggressive behaviors. If there is such a thing, I think I know a little bit about that. It's really about you keeping charge of the Lord your God, to protect your mind like a hedge, so that your mind is filled with truth and you have internal power, irrespective of what people do around you. And then he says, not only to keep the charge, but walk in his ways. I love this word ways. It's the word rut. It means a worn path. It's literally a worn path in a field or wherever it might be, through a forest, and it gives a direction of the right way to go. But it's also a pattern of behavior. So the word walk, this word walk is really descriptive, because obviously to go somewhere you have to walk. The word is yalak, which means to carry while acting. In other words, that you are literally carrying something while you're walking. Well, he's just described to us what you carry. Keep the charge. You take the charge, the watch of God. You take the truth of the Lord your God, and you carry it while you're behaving, while you're walking, while you're living. You don't just look at the Bible in the morning, you have your little devotion, and you go, okay, that's it for the day, I'm safe. No, you have to take that. You have to meditate on it. You have to think about it. You have to carry it throughout the day. It gives you an internal strength. It gives you power, irrespective of what's going on around you. And he says, walk, yalak, carry truth. It's God's own way. But this word darak, which means way, this rut. You know, I'm a habitual guy. I walked in this morning to a coffee shop that I go to regularly, and I got there a little later than I normally do. Normally I get there at 5. This morning I slept in. I got there at 6. And I walk in, and the table I always sit at, there's a guy sitting there. I'm like, dude, let's go outside. I mean, I really was offended. He's sitting in my chair like I own it. Because I'm a man of habits. I like habits. If you don't think so, you should ask my wife. I mean, I love habits. We go to a restaurant, I order the same things. Why don't you try this? Nope, I'm trying this. Never change. How many guys are like that? Raise your hand. Men or women? Come on. It's those habits. But think about this. If we're habitual in our behavior, but our mind is filled with the charge of God, what happens? Our behaviors, our walk, we're carrying truth. We are walking in the path of God. We're walking in kind of a rut. We can't get out of it, but it's a good rut to be in. We are walking in the ways of the Lord. Very important concept. My grandsons, I just took them for the first time last year to Disneyland. We've been back since then, but took my two grandsons. They hadn't been there before. Oh, man, they heard about Autopia. When I was a kid, Autopia was everything. They had 3 rides when I was a kid at Disneyland. And they were all E rides, and I only had 2 E tickets, but that's a joke for older people. Anyway, but Autopia, I loved it. You know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand if you know about it. Yeah, you know. And it's, those putt-putt cars are super loud, and you just want to get there. Because at 8 years old, you get to drive a car. And my oldest grandson, Trent, second oldest grandson, Trent, he's in there and he's like, Grandpa, I'm going to drive this super fast and I'm going to win the race. I said, well, not if we're in front of you. He said, I'll just drive around you. I said, okay, you go with that. We know Autopia. He didn't know. He gets off the car at the end of the road. And he goes, I couldn't even turn it. I didn't even have to turn the wheel. It went where I wanted to go. All I could do is go or stop. That's not that fun. Then he says, let's go again. Because you're in a rut, you're stuck. Listen, there are some things that you need as a rut, as a way that determines your behavior. Because let's be honest, there are a lot of distractions and we don't have a hedge around our mind. And look at the descriptive behavior that David gives to Solomon. You need to hedge your mind, you need to keep it, and then you need to walk in the derek, the rut, the way of God. Walking in His, that is the Lord your God's ways. It's a dependent walk. It's behavior that is dependent upon the directions of God. He said, remember, he said in verse 1, in verse 2, he said, be strong. Show yourself to be a man. How do you do that? By being an alpha male, an alpha 2, or by really beginning to control your mind and your thoughts and your worldview directed by the Word of God. This is the power of what he speaks. And he says, he breaks it down into 4 areas: keeping his statutes, keeping his commands, keeping his rules, keeping his testimonies. Really what he's talking about, each one of these has to do with a different aspect of relationship to the law. This first one, the statutes, it's talking about the decrees of God, how to behave. The second one, commandments, is the collective law, the total law, which is summed up, Jesus said in this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And then the third one, the rules, have to do with justice, those judgments of God. And then finally, the testimonies, which is a warnings. You carry these and warnings against being over here when you should be here. David's got it right. Solomon, you need to be strong and show yourself a man. Not by conquering nations, but by conquering the real battle in your mind. That's where real strength is. Whether you're a beta male or an alpha male, men, you need to have the conquering of truth in your mind. And it only comes through deliberate submission to God's word. In verse 3, he says, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. I love this because he's talking about a connection to the law, the truth of God in the Old Testament, and prosperity. Now, we think of prosperity as something that has to do with financial gain, and it is. But we think of prosperity as power and influence. But he's talking about a different kind of prosperity. Let me read to you something out of Psalm chapter 1, my favorite psalm. I shouldn't say that. They're all great, God. Thank you. But I like Psalm 1. Thank you for that one, especially today. Anyway, here we go. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners. That word way is derek. You remember? The rut of sinners. Nor sits in the seat of the scornful, of the scoffers, or the judgers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is absorbed with truth. He is creating a hedge around his mind. And not only a hedge around his mind, but what happens is, as you have the hedge around that mind, then you keep the charge and you walk in the way. It changes your behavior. You don't change your behavior hoping then you'll learn truth. You learn truth and it will change your behavior. It's an inside-out proposition. And then it says, he will be like a tree. This guy that's committed, doesn't follow the wicked, but follows truth. He will be like a tree planted by the streams of water that yield its fruit in its season, and its leaves do not wither. And listen to this. And all he does will prosper. All he does will prosper. So in Psalm 1 and in 1 Kings chapter 2, we find out what it means to be a strong man. You see, a tree is powerful. Its roots are deep, and the roots dig into an underground, invisible source of nourishment. And when the weather changes and the wind comes, a healthy tree doesn't snap in the wind because they pulled up all that nourishment, and they have flexibility in the wind, and they have leaves that provide shade for others. They produce fruit that provides nourishment for others. And then he says, but the ungodly are not so. For they are like the chaff that the wind drives away. The only chaff I know about growing up in Southern California are tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds. You know what I hated about tumbleweeds? For a long time, we lived in Ontario, California. And back then, those communities were real small. We go out for a drive, and my dad would hit a tumbleweed, and I'm embarrassed. I don't even know why, but I'm embarrassed because the tumbleweed's just hanging onto the car. And it just hangs on. You know the thing about tumbleweeds or chaff? 3 things about them. They are rootless, they are fruitless, and they are worthless. If you want your life to be prosperous and powerful outside of biblical truth, your life will be rootless. When the wind blows, it rips it right out of the ground. It will be fruitless. You will not have an impact in other people's lives, and your life will be worthless. Not you, but your life will be worthless. And so he calls us to really take the statutes, the rules, the commands, the laws of God and meditate on them and carry them as we walk in the way, the rut of God, and we become prosperous like a tree. You want real power, men? You want to have a family that not only respects you, but is transformed by truth because you example what it means to be a man. I have 3 sons. And I want those 3 boys to know and they're men, but I want them to know what it means to be a godly man, and I'm doing my best to example that, and I fail often, but I really strive for them to know that you can be tender, loving, and love God with all of your heart. And I have 4 daughters, and those 4 daughters, I want them to know when they go on a date with a man or a boy. My youngest daughter's not allowed to date till she's 35. She's breaking that rule, I think. But anyway, I want them to know how they're to be treated. and that they can love God with all of their heart, and they don't have to get outside that rut. If we're going to recapture the family, we are going to have to be men, godly men of power, and I don't mean in terms of passive-aggressive or aggressive controls. I mean in the control of your mind through the Word of God being hedged around you so that predators can't get in, the distractions don't happen, that you carry and walk the charge, the statutes of God. And what happens is it creates real, godly power. And this is the first step we have to do to recapture the family. You see, a legacy. Let me give you the quote because you're looking at it. Legacy is built through fathers teaching their children to love God, not through building their own empire. How much time do you spend here versus here? Because the world is telling me, and I don't even need the world to tell me, my flesh is telling me I need to build an empire. And God is telling me, no, you need to build your sons. You need to build your daughters. If you want a legacy like David was speaking of, listen to what David said. Let me read it to you. It says this in 1 Kings 2:4, that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, David, saying. So God gave a prophecy to David, and he says, listen to this, if your sons pay close attention to their way, Derek, to walk before me in faithfulness with all of their heart and with all of their soul, listen to this, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. You want a legacy? You want a legacy? David was promised a legacy, but the caveat was, your sons have to walk in my ways. Solomon was a man who caught the vision of what it means to be a godly follower of God. Legacy is built through fathers teaching their children to love God, not through building their own empire. And of course, if you don't have children, it's your job then to pour into other people. You older men and women, you need to give a legacy of pouring into the younger men and women. Those of you who are men and you're watching single mothers struggling with their sons, guys, step in with permission, but step in and love those families well. Don't sit back and say, oh man, you need to do a better job with your sons or your daughters. Step in and love well. A legacy is pouring into children the love of God, not through building an empire. Let me just close with this. When you look at Jesus, do you see weakness? Some people do. They see Jesus as weak. In fact, he calls himself meek. Does that mean weak? Here's the irony of that. People that think the word meek means weakness are exactly the opposite, because meek means power. Let me show you what I mean. This is what Jesus said. Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That gives the heart of Jesus for other people. And then he says in verse 29, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I love this. For I am gentle. The word there is meek. Protes, which means meek, and lowly or humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The heart of Jesus is one of meekness and humility. Think about this. The creator of the universe came and dwelt in the life of a human experience. And he did this because he wanted to carry the burden of sin. And so and when he talks about this yoke, those of you who sin, just come to me. Those of you who are destroyed and judged by the law, which are all of us, condemned by the law, come to me. My yoke is easy. So come to me. Believe in me. And as in the previous verse, I will give you rest. That place, no matter what you're going through, is the place of restoration of your soul. even if your life is chaos, your marriage is falling apart, your business is at the brink of bankruptcy, or your reputation has been destroyed, listen, Jesus said, set all that aside. Just come to me. I'll give you rest. Have you come to Jesus? The true, most powerful man to ever live is Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God.